In the dark shadows, in the white cold, fearlessly we search for knowledge new and old. We drink the strong spirits and read the ancient tomes. The order of the Abracast. We are the brave and the bold.
At the beginning of the 17th century, the curate of Loudun was Urbain Grandier, and those talents which led to success in this world, this man united a corruption of morals which dishonored his character. His conduct had made him many enemies. These were not merely rivals, but husbands and fathers, some of high position, who were outraged at the dishonor he brought on their family. He was nevertheless a wonderfully proud man. And the bitterness of his tongue and the harshness with which he pursued his advantages only excited them more. And these advantages were numerous, for he had a marvelous faculty for pettifogging. His iniquities had rendered him the scourge of the town, whose principal curate in the greatest scandal he was. At one and the same moment, this is provided by the dispensation obtained by many fathers of families to assist at the divine service in some other parish, and by the permissions granted them to receive the sacrament from some other hand.
The Abracast, occult, history, conspiracy, and violence.
Hey everybody, I'm John. This is the Abracast. John, we're in France this evening, so I am Jean Sauers. This is the Abracast. Thank you guys for tuning in. I hope you enjoy the show. Quick note, if you're a fan of the Wednesday book club, we're doing we're up to like the 14th 14 plus the 6 lesson things. I don't know. I'm not good at math. We're very deep into Nietzsche's Thus Spake Zarathustra. We're not going to do a Zarathustra episode this week on Wednesday. So if you're a fan of the Wednesday book club, just hang tight. We got some stuff coming up because it's Halloween week. So we got some shit. We got some Halloween shit that we're going to be doing. Sorry for that. Yeah, so just hang tight. Zarathustra will be back next week. With that being said, let's get into this. I got a fucking crazy story for you guys tonight. The featured book is The Devils of Loudun by Edmund Goldsmith. It was originally published in 1887. I guess the version we're reading was published in 1887, but it was written by eyewitnesses to the events that we're going to be talking about that took place in like 1630 something. Like the Cold Open said, it was the beginning of the 17th century. So we're gonna get into it. Right now is a great time for me to remind you all, if you are playing at home, if you're away from the work or the gym or walking the dog or whatever the fuck you do when you listen to this podcast, now is the time I want you to summon the vessel of the art. And I want you to mix your favorite weapon of mass distraction in the vessel. And I want you... I've mixed a jinn jihad in here. But I want you to mix your own. I mean, if it's like a fucking pudding pops, I don't know, what is it? Pudding, Jello, I don't know, ambrosia salad, whatever fucking gets your dick hard, I want you to put it in there. And I want you to raise it to the sky and say thank you to my Patreon and Subscribe Star supporters. Thank you. Without this would not be possible. We're actually going to get more than 2 episodes this week, guys. So a lot of props to the supporters on Patreon and Subscribe Star. Okay. So here's to you. Here's to you guys. Thank you. Without this, it wouldn't be possible. Salute, or as they say in German, at least when I lived there, what'd they say? Rose! Alright, let's get into it. Let's get into the demons of Loudun. It's a fucking exorcism story with a black magician. I can't wait. Alright. Okay, so in case you're wondering about the cold open, petty fogging, I had to look this up, is when you focus over much on petty details in order to make a case or to prove your argument. And a curate is a religious title. It's like a functionary. It's like an admin position for a church. And this dude was grandier, was a piece of work. He developed like a group of powerful supporters, other dudes in the church, local politicians and bureaucrats, and he also made a lot of enemies. Like the Cold Open said, not just his rivals, but common townsfolk, respectable family men. There were a lot of people who fucking hated this guy. And he'd talk shit on other priests. He would publicly criticize and ridicule these other guys' sermons. And eventually he found himself, where? In court, locked up. Whoop, whoop. And the people started to give their testimony about this guy, and they would claim that he was screwing these chicks in his church. How do they say it? Louise Borleo deposed that they had found Grandier. I imagine it's Grandier. Let me do this whole thing again. Louise Borleo deposed that they had found Grandier lying with women and girls flat on the ground in his church. Anyway, Grandier marshaled all his powerful supporters, and eventually he wound up being acquitted. Twice, actually. The archbishop who was in charge actually told him, look, you're acquitted, doesn't mean you're innocent, and you need to get the fuck out of town. Grandier did not think proper to follow the advice or obey the order. This is back to the book. Far from showing the modesty which was enjoined him, he looked upon his acquittal as a triumph and returned to Loudun with a laurel branch in his hand for the mere purpose of insulting his opponents. Neutral persons were shocked at so little modesty of conduct. His enemies were irritated, and even his friends blamed him. Without pausing an instant, he set to work to obtain every advantage over his adversaries. He was not satisfied with having obtained a full meed he was entitled to. He resolved to carry his vengeance as far as the law would allow him, and he prepared to prosecute before the courts all those who had taken steps against him. and to claim damages of various amounts and the restitution of the revenues of his cure, the sentence of the Archbishop of Bordeaux, entitling him thereto. In vain did his best friends use every means to turn him iron so imprudent a design. God, who intended to cut off his gangrenous, it's like a member that has gangrene, right? Member from the body of his church, and to make him an example memorable to all ages, abandoned him to his own willful blindness. Nevertheless, amidst all these proceedings, nothing had been as yet heard of the black art magic. And up to this time, no one had even thought of suspecting him of that crime. So, in the town, there was this covenant with all these hot, nuns hanging around, these hot French fucking nuns, doing each other's hair and nails. These fucking nuns would do like bikini car washes to raise money on the weekends. They'd stay up late and they get into pillow fights with their sheer little nighties, playing truth or dare. Anyhow, the covenant lost their head priest or their confessioner. And out of the blue, our boy, Urbain Grenadier, steps up and nominates himself for this position, even though he didn't have any experience in doing this sort of work. He didn't get the position. I'm not sure why they thought this guy might not be the right dude to be locked in a covenant with these horny, celibate, fucking French nuns. I wonder why he might not have been the fellow to give these nuns communion, to administer the body of Christ and administer the confessions. Anyway, nice try, bro. If if I was a priest in the 17th century France in a bourgeoisie neighborhood, I probably would have tried to get this position myself. He didn't get the position, though. Back to the book. However, this may be extraordinary symptoms began to declare themselves within the covenant, but they were hushed as far as possible and not allowed to be known outside of the walls. To do otherwise would have been to give this new institution, the convent, had only been around for, I think, 6 years. So it was a new institution, and it would have dealt it a severe blow. And to risk ruining it at its birth, the nuns and their confessor understood. It was therefore decided to work in the greatest secrecy and to cure, or at least mitigate, the evil. It was hoped that God, touched by the patience with which the chastisement was borne, would himself in his mercy send a remedy, for there were 17 in number, and everyone was found to be either fully possessed or partially under the influence of the evil one. So these poor, hot, bourgeoisie French nuns were possessed. Rumors and gossip spread through the town, and the convent fell into ruin. The priest that passed on installing Grandier, his name was Canon Mignon, like filet mignon. And a bunch of his assistants and stuff went to the convent, and we're going to get back to the monk. So imagine this Canon Mignon and a bunch of assistants came into a convent filled with hot French horny nuns. that were possessed, apparently. It became necessary to have recourse to exorcisms. The word alone is for some people a subject of ridicule, as it had been clearly proved that religion is a mere folly and the faith of the church is a fable. True Christians must despise these grinning impostors. Exorcisms then were employed. The demon, forced to manifest itself, yielded his name and began by giving these girls the most horrible convulsions. He went so far as to raise from the earth the body of the superior who was being exorcised, and to reply to secret thoughts, which were manifested neither in words nor by any exterior signs. Questioned accordingly to the form prescribed by the ritual as to why he had entered the body of the nun, he replied it was from hatred. But when being questioned as to the name of the magician, he answered it was Urbain Grandier. Profound astonishment seized Canon Mignon and his assistants, as they had indeed looked upon Grandier as a scandalous priest, but never had they imagined that he was guilty of magic. They were therefore not satisfied with one single questioning, and they repeated the interrogation several times, as always received the same reply. The declaration of the evil spirit couldn't not to make more great commotion. This is translated from French, remember, and to have results which required precautions to be taken at once. The canon, this Mignon, like a wise man, put himself in the communication with justice. So they're getting the court involved, and informed the magistrates of what is passing at the convent. On the 11th October, 1632, Grandier prepared for all contingency. He had already taken his measures. So Grandier started mobilizing his political machine again to get his ass out of all this hot water with all these hot French horny nuns. Back to the book. At the same time, he made all possible use of his extraordinary talents for pettifogging. Presented petition on petition, questioned every statement of the exorcist and of the nuns, threatened their confessor, Mignon, complained that his reputation was attacked, and that the means were thus taken from him of doing the good of his position. Required and demanded that the nuns should be locked up and the exorcisms be put to an end. He knew well enough that his demands were out of the question, and the civil justice had nothing to do with the exercise of religious function. But he wished, if possible, to embarrass the exorcists and commit the judges with the bishops, or at any rate throw discord among them and give, so his Calvinists an opportunity for crying out, and he succeeded. So at the time in Europe, there was a problem between Calvinists and the Huguenots and Catholics. And so one of the reasons that this guy might have had this bureaucratic, like this political machine working for him is because he was pretending to be a Catholic or a Calvinist, but he was actually a Huguenot. Anyhow, I'm not going to get bogged down into this in here. And I thought that I'd cut pretty much all out of it. So I just felt like I needed to explain that line. Back to the book. The magistrates separated, only those who were favorable to him remained. The rest ceased to appear at the exorcisms, and Mignon also drew from the convent. He withdrew from the convent. Excitement rose in the public mind. 1,000 arguments on this or that side permeated the town, and 1,000 quarrels took place on all sides. The excitement, however, in this dispute settled nothing, and the exorcisms which continued had no better result, and Grandier triumphed, and his friends admired his wit and his skill, which proclaimed aloud that he could be convicted of nothing. And yet, even as regards to women, although they knew how far he had gone in this matter, until now the court had taken no notice of the affair. But the noise it had made in the world since the first days of October 1632 had reached the Queen's ears, and she requested information, and the Abbé Mariscot, one of her chaplains, was sent to examine the matter and report back to her. And he arrived in Loudun on the 28th November and witnessed what was going on. No immediate consequences followed, but an incident soon occurred which caused a sudden change in the position of affairs. So what had happened, what this change was, is that the king was sending this chap around to these towns, and his job was to take all these old castles and forts that littered the French countryside and knock them over, because, you know, revolutionaries would exploit them. And he's the king, so he's like, I don't want anyone to have fortresses and castles that I don't control. So go knock them the fuck over. So, when this chap came to Loudun, he heard this story of this rogue Grandier, and he heard the stories of these fucking hot French bikini-possessed nuns, and he made it back to the king, and he told the king and the cardinal all about these possessed bitches and this evil wizard, and the king set up a commission of the most learned judges in the region. Then he also issued decrees to arrest and imprison Grandier and all of his accomplices. So it's a little bit early, but I feel like this is a great time to do this.
Learn more at Abracast.com. Get bonus content and access to the private Abracast workgroup by signing up for the mailing list. Get all that, plus many exclusive episodes by supporting the show at patreon.com or subscribestar.com.
Do you find yourself quoting horror movies to friends or starting conversations with strangers about haunted mirrors?
You do?
Then look no further than the Nightgeist podcast.
Grab a beverage and join us weekly as we discuss all things paranormal, strange, and murdery together. Find us on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, or anywhere else podcasts are heard. Also, you may check out our website, nightgeistpod.com, and find us on all social media apps. Just search for Nightgeist Podcast.
We've been waiting for you.
on this month's exclusive Order of the Fellowcraft episode.
This Halloween, we are summoning the rider on the red horse. I evoke the bornless one, that didst create the earth and the heavens, that didst create the night and the day, that didst create the darkness and the light. Thou art Os Oron O Ferris, whom no man has seen at any time. Thou art Jabas, and thou art Japus. Thou hast distinguished between the just and the unjust, and thou didst make the female and the male. And thou didst produce the seed and the fruit, and thou didst form men to love one another and to hate one another. A high ritual from the Lesser Key of Solomon.
Learn more at Abracast.com.
The commissioner commenced his investigation and proceeded to hear the witnesses on the 17th of December. The evidence of the nuns was also heard, and that of the lay person of both sexes. Oh, this is a good one. Amongst other, the two women, the one whom confessed to having a criminal relations with Grandier, in that he had offered to make her a princess of magicians, whilst the second confirmed the evidence of the first. As regards to the nuns, they deposed that Grandier had introduced themselves into the convent by day and night for 4 months without anyone knowing how he got in. And he presented himself to them whilst standing at divine service and tempted them to indecent action by both word and deed. I'm going to toast to that. That they were often struck by invisible persons, and that the marks of the blows were so visible that the doctors and surgeons had easily found them. And that beginning of all these troubles was signified by the apparition of Prior Musawat, their first confessor. This was the guy, when he left, he started this problem. When he left or died or whatever happened to him, he left or died. This is when Gardiner applied for this position. So he's there. These fucking horny French nuns are seeing an apparition of this guy. The Mother Superior and 7 or 8 other nuns, when confronted with Grandier, identified him, although it was ascertained that they had never seen him save by magic, and that he had never had anything to do with their affairs. The 2 women formerly mentioned and the 2 priests maintained the truth of their evidence. The 2 priests they're talking about, they were the ones that were like, we seen him fucking chicks in his church. In a word, besides the nuns and 6 lay women, 60 witnesses deposed to adulteries, incest, sacrilege, and other crimes committed by the accused, even in the most secret places of the church, as in the vestry where the Holy Host was kept on the days and at all hours. As regards to the nuns It was observed that they never contradicted themselves, whether questioned together or separately, though they were examined often by different persons and as skillfully as possible. Now criminals do not manage this, for the cleverest have the greatest difficulty in avoiding contradictory statements. Those writers who have supported Grandier have never discovered the least discrepancy in the evidence of the nuns, nor did Grandier ever plead malice on their part as a defense, for they had never seen him, nor had he had anything to do with it or their affairs, as we have said. If, as Calumny asserts, the only thing sought was the death of Grandier, here were sufficient proofs to burn him, if only for abusing the privileges of his ministry and of his church, for the sacrileges he had committed therein. But the justice was not satisfied with punishing one kind of crime when she finds traces of another still more serious. It was moreover a Christian duty to assist the views of God. Her permitted so strange an event to confound the calumnies of the Protestants. Here you see this, the politics of religion poking up here again in the story. And to prove the demonstration of the possession of the nuns and the magic exercised by the accused, to this the commission and the other judges applied themselves. Thus it was a matter rather of religion than of jurisprudence. They resolved to begin by prayer to God, who is the Father of all light, rightly considering that all France was watching the trial with eager eyes, and it was shrouded in a thick veil of obscurity, and that their verdict would entail important consequences. They therefore prepared to receive divine assistance and the grace by the frequent confessions and by often receiving the holy sacrament. Then they decree the general procession to implore celestial aid in so difficult a matter, and to excite the devotion of the masses by their example. And they went in body during the whole of the trial to visit the churches of the city, aside being by the bishop of the 40-hour services, 40 hours, and reached each in time for the elevation of the host. And then thence the exorcists went to the church, fixated upon the exorcisms, and the judges proceeded to the tribunals to continue the case. And the evening all returned to the church for an evensong. The examination lasted 40 days, during which demons gave them the clearest proof of their presence, and the bodies of the persons exorcised, and every day added new evidence against Grandier, and yet never said anything against him which did not turn out strictly true. These assertions merits distinct proof, which will be found interesting. As regards to the presence of devils in the possessed, the church teaches us in its rituals that there are 4 principal signs by which it can be undoubtedly recognized. These signs are the speaking or understandings of a language unknown to the person possessed, the revelations of the future or of events happening far away. The exhibition of strength beyond the years and natures of the actor, or floating in the air for a few moments. The church does not require, in order to have recourse to exorcisms, that all these marks should be found in the same subject. One alone, if well authenticated, is sufficient to demand public exorcism. Now they are all to be found in the nuns of Loudun. And in such numbers, they can only mention the principal cases. All right, so Friday, June 23rd, 1634, they brought Grandier out of the prison and took him to a church where all the possessed nuns were. And they started an exorcism, and they were questioning the demons that were inhabiting these hot nuns, and several of these demons were, snitches. And they started to spill the beans on Grandier. They started talking about the pacts that he entered into with these demons, and one of them produced a document that was written in Gardinier's handwriting, and it read, "My Lord and Master Lucifer, I recognize you as my God and promise to serve you all my life. I renounce every other God, Jesus Christ, and all the other saints, the Catholic, Apostolic, and Roman Church, its sacraments, with all the prayers that may be said for me. And I promise to do all the evil I can. I renounce the holy oil and the water of baptism, together with all the merits of a Jesus Christ and his saints. And should I fail to serve and adore you and do homage to you thrice daily, I abandon to you my life as your due." And another one of these fucking demons produced a talisman, or this magical charm. Back to the book. Now, here is a specimen of another kind of pact or magical charm. It was composed of the flesh of a child's heart, extracted in an assembly of magicians held at Orleans in 1631, of the ashes of the holy wafer that had been burnt, and of something else which the least straight-laced decency forgives me to name. Another one of these demons, another one of these demon-possessed nuns said that Gardinier had been marked, and they took Gardinier and they found the marks in his body, and they stuck needles into these demon marks, and it says that there was no pain or blood was extracted because the marks were magical marks. And so what's left? For this poor fuck. Back to the book. The trial being completed and the magician duly convicted, there only remained the sentence, the evildoer. No one among the Catholics, or indeed among all honest men, failed to applaud the sentence of Grandier. Back to the book. Here we go. And we have declared and declare that said Urban Grandier attainted and convicted of the crimes of magic, malfeasance, and possession occurred through his act in the persons of uncertain Ursuline nuns of the town of Loudun, and other women together with other crimes resulting therein for reparations whereof had condemned and do condemn the said grandier to make amende honorable, bareheaded, a rope around his neck, holding his hands a burning torch of the weight of 2 pounds, before the principal gate of Saint Pierre du Marché, and before that of Saint Ursula of the said town, and there on his knees to ask pardon of God, the King, and justice. And that done, he be led to the public square in Saint Croix, to be there tied to a stake for the purpose that shall be erected in the said square, and his body to be burnt with the packs and magical inscriptions now in custody of the court, together with the manuscript book written by him against the celibacy of priests, which I want to say probably that's what this whole thing is about, as he's writing books against the celibacy of priests. And his ashes to be scattered to the wind. We have declared all his property forfeit and confiscated to the crown, less a sum of 150 livres, which shall be expended to the purchase of a copper plate on which shall be engraved the present sentence, and the same shall be placed in a prominent position in the said church of Saint Ursula, there to be preserved forever. And before this present sentence shall be carried out, we order that said grandier shall be put to the question, ordinary and extraordinary, to discover his accomplices, pronounced at Loudun on the said grenadier, and executed 18th August 1634. And the rest of Urbain's life is short, miserable, and painful. He is surrounded by monks whose job it was to convert this black magician. In my mind's eye, in my mind's theater, I see these monks just surrounding his prison cell, yelling and heckling at him in shifts, like all day long for like 40 days. This guy, Father Lactane, who is a man of great faith, exorcised and blessed the implements of torture before they put it to use, as was always done in the case of torturing black magicians. So the book says, per the book, quote, the boots were applied, unquote, and the judges asked their questions. So there are all kinds. So I actually try to chase this down. There are all kinds of, quote, the boots, unquote, torture. A foot shin crusher was called the Spanish boot. They had these iron boots that had spikes on the inside of them that they would tighten with screws that would crush you. The Malay boot, which kind of grinds and crushes your instep and your ankles. So I'm acutely aware of this, by the way. I think I might have mentioned on the show before that I suffer from the gout. And if people say I suffer from gout, they don't suffer from gout, by the way. You have to say the gout. That gives it respect. Like, in a few different of my past lives, I've suffered barbed wire. As a combat engineer, I've suffered barbed wire. And as an independent professional wrestler, I've suffered barbed wire. And the closest thing that I could get to explain the gout to you is if someone was flossing in between your toe bones with barbed wire. Feet pain is bad pain, is what I'm trying to say. Okay, so the Malay boot, the Spanish boot, and then there was this foot press or foot screw, which could be like this crank machine that pulverizes your foot. And then, you know, there's all sorts of like foot burning or roasting techniques and devices where they just like roast your feet. The feet were a safe bet if you didn't want to kill the motherfucker. Obviously, if you're getting your feet crushed or roasted or whatever, you know, you're in fucking big trouble. And your quality of life is probably dropping rapidly, but it's not killing you, you know. The foot press is what Victor Hugo wrote about when Esmeralda was being tortured in The Hunchback of Notre Dame. He wrote that he wrote it in 1830, in 1831, but it took place in 1482. And our man here, Grandier, was being tortured in 1634. So I'm leaning towards this classic foot press. If you made me guess what it was, this is what I would bet. So Grandier never gave up any associates or accomplices he had. He never converted. He refused to call out to a Jesus or the Blessed Virgin Mary. They tried to get him to pray to God, and he refused. And the book says, quote, when they tried to make him say the prayer which every good Christian addresses his guardian angel, especially in great extremities, he said that he did not know it. Such was his conduct under torture. In such a crisis, every feeling of religion would be awakened in an ordinary man. So when they got tired of crushing this motherfucker's feet, they got tired of just destroying and grinding up this guy's feet. His legs were then washed and placed near the fire to restore circulation, and he began to talk to the guards, joking and laughing, unquote. Even though they were supposed to strangle him to death. I mentioned this. They were supposed to strangle him to death before they burned his body. They fucked it up, and the rope caught fire, and Grandier fell into the fire alive and died an excruciating death, being burned alive. In the book, they call them faggots. That's not my word. That's their word. And the only reason I said it is because I wanted to say it on a podcast. He fell into the faggots. And he died an excruciating death. Thus did he close his criminal career by a death. But the end of the magician was not the end of the effects of his sorcery. And the possessions, far from ceasing as he had been hoped, they continued for a time. So there's a big bit in the book about all of the religious and justice dudes, like all the judges and the religious people, and they went on to have all these awful hard times after the death of this guy. And they said, well, it's the demons that did it, bro. Like a guy got attacked by a homeless dude with a lamp. And another dude, son, like, became insane or something. So there's, like, all these stories after, like, as an epilogue. It's kind of like God let these demons... This is one of these things that doesn't make any sense. These guys put on trial a magician that made a bunch of these nuns horny and stuff, and they punished him and they killed him, and then the nuns got saved or whatever. But all the people involved in the trial had to deal with all these demons afterwards as a punishment. You're just like, what the fuck? What kind of sense does this all make? That's what God wanted, bro. It's all part of God's plan.
Thank you for listening to this episode. Send an email or visit us on social media to let us know what you think about this topic. And please remember to leave a 5-star rate and review. On this month's exclusive Order of the Fellowcraft episode.
This Halloween, we are summoning the rider on the red horse. I evoke the bornless one, that didst create the earth and the heavens, that didst create the night and the day, that didst create the darkness and the light. Thou art Os Oran O Ferris, whom no man has seen at any time. Thou art Jabas, and thou art Japus. Thou hast distinguished between the just and the unjust, and thou didst make the female and the male. And thou didst produce the seed and the fruit, and thou didst form men to love one another and to hate one another. A high ritual from the Lesser Key of Solomon.
Learn more at Abracast.com.